It's Mr. Thompson with a science video lesson talking about genetics, moving on to a new topic in science. And here's our table of contents. Okay, we're going to talk about genes, chromosomes, karyotyping, autosomes, sex cells, and somatic cells. There is a table of contents that I will put in the description below. If you want to skip straight to one of those things, feel free to do that. But here we go with genes. All right, so genes are the instructions. All right, you've probably heard this before. It's the things that we inherit from our parents that determine our traits, the traits of a living organism. Okay, all living organisms have genes. Pretty sure. But particularly with people, we inherit our genes from our parents, and it gives our body the code that then determines how we look, what our personality's like, all kinds of things like that. Okay. Genes are made up of DNA sequences. Okay, we'll get into this a little bit. I will have a whole nother video after this about DNA, so stick around for that. But just so you know, sequences, it's a code encoded into the DNA. Okay. Long strands of molecules. Yep, DNA is actually just a bunch of different kinds of molecules. Once again, check out the video on DNA if you want to know more about that, but they are in the nucleus of every single cell, well, almost every single cell in the body of an organism. All right, that's kind of just the basic introduction to genes. Now, chromosomes, okay? So you might have heard about chromosomes. What's the difference between chromosomes and genes? Let's get into that. Chromosomes are a physical structure that DNA forms into, okay? I'm going to back up a little bit on genes. Genes are short sequences. One gene in particular might give a certain trait, okay? So they're short sequences of DNA. Chromosomes are how all your DNA sort of bunches up when the cells duplicate, as you can see, okay? There's a certain process called mitosis, okay? So when your body is growing, or when you're healing, or when you're replacing old dead cells, the cells are constantly, or not constantly, but, cells are constantly copying themselves. One cell is not constantly making a copy, but cells in general are constantly copying. There's a certain percentage of time in the life of a cell when it takes, some time to copy. That process is called mitosis, and that is when chromosomes exist. That's when we can see chromosomes physically. I think, the DNA, when it's not copying, when the cell's not duplicating, it stretches out and just takes up the whole nucleus. Now, the technical, strands, the physical strands may still be, in their respective parts that then clump together into the chromosomes, but we don't see them when it's not in mitosis. You can't see those chromosomes. Okay, humans have 23 pairs, so a total of 46 chromosomes, but 23 pairs. 23 from the mother and 23 from the father. That, like it says here, again, can only be seen during mitosis. More on chromosomes. This is kind of an example. Let's try to point in the right direction. This is an interesting example. One example of what a chromosome kind of looks like. There's these two sort of long, potato shapes or something like that, and they're connected together. Okay, the center point where there's sort of a little point where it looks like there's two pieces kind of connected together. That's called the centromere. Okay, and I've drawn these blue and green colors on there to represent what scientists do, what geneticists do when they're studying chromosomes. They stain chromosomes with color, and the color then attaches to certain parts of the chromosome and gives it a certain look. Okay, and what we do is we take the chromosomes and we pair them up. So based on their size and based on the color banding that we get when they're stained with certain chemicals. Okay, and what it is we're looking for the pairs that come one from each parent, right? We get one of these from mom, one of these from dad, or whatever. The matching pairs are called homologous. So if we find one from dad that matches the one from mom, those are homologous chromosomes. Okay. Now there's a whole slew more, right? There's a total of 23 pairs, 46 all up. Okay. And each of these pairs that I'm drawing here, you can see they're about the same size, and they have the same color bandings on each. So oops, that's not how I do it. The color bands here on this chromosome match this one here on the right, and the color bands here and the size match this one here. So those are each homologous pairs. If I said, look at these two chromosomes, you know, this one and that one, those are non-homologous because they don't match, their sizes don't match, and the color banding doesn't match either. Okay, arranging chromosomes, so looking at a cell that's going through mitosis, staining the colors and match, and then, you know, whether you capture an image like with a photograph, or you draw chromosomes out, arranging them by size in a sort of physical, you know, drawing a picture or taking a photo and then maybe copying and pasting them into order, is called karyotyping. And karyotyping is something that geneticists do and that doctors and scientists do to understand different life forms, and you can sort of know a thing. You can know some things about a fetus or a person, a young person, based on their chromosomes. For example, some genetic disorders are chromosomal disorders. Sometimes people have too many, sometimes they have too few, sometimes there's something wrong with the chromosome or something like that. And so karyotyping can identify some of those issues in people. Or organisms. So, and they're numbered, right? They're numbered 1, 2, 3, 4, on up to 23, the pairs. We number the pairs, not the individual chromosomes, but the pairs. Okay? Autosomes, all right? Autosomes is a word you need to know. It is the name for the first 22 pairs of chromosomes, all right? 1, 2, 3, 4, the biggest, down to the 22nd, you know, largest, or the second smallest. That very smallest one is the, we'll get to in a second, but males and females both have all of these 22 same pairs of chromosomes. Obviously, the DNA sequences within them are different, but ultimately they all come to, every single human person, at least genetically typical, chromosomally typical person, has these 22 pairs. The 23rd pair is the pair that determines a person's sex. All right, so the female have XX, two of the same, and the males have XY. All right, and this determines what kind of reproductive organs you get, and all kinds of other things as well. Now, I will just say real quick, this is not talking about gender. Gender is technically a different thing. Obviously, sex has a big influence on gender. I'm not going to go into all that, but this is specifically the chromosomal sex of a person. Okay. Speaking of sex, don't know if you caught that little joke I put in there, but sex cells. So the cells in your body that pertain to your sex. There are certain males obviously have certain ones, and females have a different one, which we'll get to here. But the name for these sex cells is gametes. It's like this technical term for sex cells. Males have sperm, and women, females, have ova, right? Eggs. Okay, often they're commonly referred to as eggs, but the technical term is ova. Ova is plural. Ovum is a single egg. Okay, so one of those ones where we can't just put an S on the end and call them ovums. We have to say ova for whatever reason. Okay, now these cells in humans are, and in other organisms as well, but they are created in a process that's a lot like mitosis, and the process has a name that sounds a lot like mitosis. It is different, but it results in cells that only have half the number of chromosomes. Okay, it just takes the 23 chromosomes and puts them in one of the sperm or puts them in one of the ova, right? So they're not in pairs, they're just the 23. What happens then during fertilization is that the 23 in the sperm meet the 23 from the egg, and that gives a zygote, which then grows into a fetus, typically, and will be born, a human person with all 46 chromosomes. Okay. May or may not make videos on mitosis and meiosis and the different stages. There's a lot of great videos out there already on those, so I may just share those with my classes. If anyone wants me to make videos on those, just comment below, let me know. Okay, somatic cells. This is our last slide here. But somatic cells are just all the cells that have those 46 chromosomes. So the gametes, the sex cells, don't count as somatic cells. The other cells that don't count as somatic cells are red blood cells because they do not have a nucleus. Red blood cells get rid of their nucleus to make more room to carry oxygen, which is the whole job of red blood cells. But all the other cells pretty much in the body have 46 chromosomes, and we refer to them as somatic cells. That 46 chromosomes is your full set of genes, right? All the different sets of sequences that make you who you are. That is called your genotype, okay? Now, when we look at a person's genotype, we may be able to determine things like how tall the person will be, what color hair, what all that kind of thing. You may even be able to determine some personality things. However, we know that genotype alone is not responsible for determining what a person is actually going to be like, because the environment can have an effect on the actual expression of those genes. So the actual resulting traits are called the phenotype. Okay, so genotype, phenotype. Genotype is like the blueprint. The phenotype is like the actual house, the way it gets built. Okay. The phenotype, like I said, can be influenced by the environment. So a classic example of this is identical twins, right, or triplets or whatever. They're not all exactly the same. Even their time spent in the womb can have an effect on different things about them, both physically and personality-wise and all that kind of thing. Okay, that is it on genes, introduction to genes. Next up is a video on DNA. Let me know if there's anything in particular of this stuff, trying to point the right way, that you want a video on. Happy to make new videos with answering your questions. Catch you later.